Morning, guys. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good.
She says if I leave before you
Wait a few more minutes for people to come in.
don't you waste me in the ground.
Just let yourself wake up.
I lay smiling like our sleeping children. One of us will die inside these arms. Eyes wide open, naked as we came. One will spread our ashes.
Good to see you guys. Oh, Ian. Um, we're so I've been putting together some thoughts for next week's chapel stuff. So what I have so far is every praise. That's like kind of the only thing that Carice and Lena have really felt like passionate about doing. Um, but I'm also gonna ask other people to sing like Jada, um, and maybe Chenier, um, because Chenier is awesome. She's really good. Um,
I've
but
never heard her sing.
dude, she's really good.
Wow.
She also writes too, man.
Oh, yeah, she does. I know that.
Yeah, and it's good too. It's like always
Okay.
really, yeah. It was like when I first heard it, it was like very like Corinne Bailey Ray kind of vibes. It was she's
Mhm.
cool, man. But anyway, I'm trying to um I'm gonna reach out to them, but I would love some input on some songs that you think would be, if you want to just like email me some songs that you think would be good for us to do that like would, that Maranatha could kind of like grab onto and be like, oh, that's cool. Um yeah, so just some ideas like that, that'd be awesome. And then I'll start getting everything else kind of organized, and I'll send out recordings and all that stuff.
That sounds great.
Cool. Sounds good. Awesome. Well, good morning, guys. Hope you guys are doing well.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You know, that song you were just playing, who's it by? Oh, never
Uh,
mind. I just found it. I just found it. Never mind.
yeah, Iron and Wine.
Yeah. Thank you.
Dude, it's a cool song. That all their stuff sounds like that too. It's like perfect. Like you're too tired to like think, and you just like kind of chills you out. Yeah, I love it. Cool. Well, so I hope that you guys are doing well. We will have a class tomorrow. That AP day class. I think it's at 12:45 or something like that. Um, just want to remind you guys about that. But let's start by doing some sight singing. Melodies with wicked 5/7 action. God, this guy. He also, the title of this whole thing, sight singing bonanzas. He's just such a goof. Um, okay, here's our starting pitch. We're gonna start with number 90. Actually, that's all we're gonna do. We're just gonna do number 90. Try to keep it. I know it's like first thing in the morning, looking at this stuff. It's like, oh my gosh. So let's take a look, kind of take in what we can, identify the key, starting note, ending note if it's the same thing. If we start on the tonic, give you guys some time to look at it. Hum along to yourself. And just a reminder, you have 70 seconds during the test to look at the thing and then do it. Let's try clapping it. One, two, three, four. 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 3 off. Cool. So when they say 5/7, first off, do we recognize what they're trying to reference? Right? The 5 chord in the key, which is a dominant 7th if you extend it to the 7th, right? And then, so where do we think you find that here? Take a look and kind of see if you can find it, and then I'll show you where I see it. So we're in the key of G. So then where I see the 5/7 chord is right here. Right? If you just like stacked them, you can see. Yeah. So this, all you have to do is extend that just melodically. Right. Let's try singing it. Here we go. 1 and 2, and here we go. Do, re, mi, do, ti, la, so. So, ti, re, fa, mi, re, do. Hear that 5/7? Then, yeah, nice and easy. Cool. All right. I'm going to move on to something else. Phrases. I know that I talked about this last class, and I talked about antecedent and consequent a lot. So I'm going to continue kind of just showing you guys about that, but in a little more detail. So it's in the book, the Baron book. There's like this, there's this diagram, but I'm going to go through this and kind of show you. It's a cool website. I also put this link on there. So let's go back to phrases. What is a phrase? Right. So they'll kind of tell you, they call this binary form when there are 2 phrases. So I'm just going to play this for you and you can kind of see what's going on. See that? So check it out. If you see the first, oops. All right, here. Yeah, so if you guys can see this green, the green part is the first part of the phrase, or the first phrase rather, and the blue is the second. And then pretty similar, right? Beautiful harpsichord sound from that MIDI keyboard. But you guys, yeah, but you guys see what's going on, right? It's like the only thing that's really different between the 2 phrases is like the last 2 or 3 measures, right? And even the shape of them is kind of similar. Like if you can see, oops, I'll put that on the side. The shape of them, even the very end is kind of similar. Yeah, where does it start changing? This last 4 measures, right? But even so, it starts on the same note. Right, this E kind of situation, and then this E situation here, and then it goes to this D, you know what I mean? So it has this similar shape, but the notes are not the same. So the first time, right? The second time is, right? So the harmonic stuff is still the same, or at least very similar, but yeah, you can see even below the 4 chord and the 1/6. That's like how it's moving. But the main difference between the two is what? The very, very end of the phrase, right? It's the main difference because 5 chord and it ends on the supertonic, right? Da 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 da. Da 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 da. And it ends on, so I'm sorry, it's so dark down there, but you can see that this is the 1 chord. So do you remember how I talked earlier in the semester about like how punctuation could be, or sorry, cadences could be construed as punctuation, right? So like a half cadence, like ending on the 5 is kind of like a comma, or like a ellipses, like dot dot dot, like it doesn't feel finished. And then da 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 dum bum bum, that feels like boom, a period at the end of a sentence, right? So that's the main difference between these two phrases, as you can see, and that's kind of what you're going to see as we continue on with this. But I'm going to keep on moving. Let's get rid of these guys though. Cool. Understand what a phrase is, and so now 2 or more phrases together are organized into what is called a period. The 2 most common kinds, as you can see, parallel and contrasting. The 2 things that are the things that they have in common, right? There's 2 phrases together equal a period. The first phrase ends with an inconclusive cadence, like I said, right? A half cadence, or even a deceptive. And then the second phrase ends with perfect, authentic cadence. So in that last one, we kind of talked about that there were 2 phrases that it kind of went antecedent and consequent, but the first parts of them were the same. So would that be a parallel or a contrasting? So as you can see, the parallel period, these 2 phrases are super similar. Oh gosh, it's too early in the morning to play. But see, you guys can kind of see there. There's like this little, whatever animation that they're doing here. But as you can see, these first halves are like identical. And this is where it starts changing, but the shape of them is the same. They kind of start on the same notes and they end differently. So 2 things to keep in mind. Let's look at another example. These phrases are even more similar, they say. That's kind of cool, actually. Throw a beat under that. Yeah, But look, it's like they're almost the only difference, right, is the thing that's in red, is these last two little things. Da, 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 da. So it ends on a, sorry. The first phrase ends on that half cadence, right? We're in A minor, so E. And the last one is, right, authentic. So it's very like comma and then period. So it feels like the question and answer, or like beginning, ending. Kind of like, how you would, do you guys diagram sentences in English? I sure hope not. I hope that they've gotten rid of that. But when I was young, you had to like diagram out sentences, and like it would be there, and then you put, this is the subject here, this is the whole. And so I didn't really enjoy that, but it kind of helps with music, I guess. Contrasting period, obviously, pretty similar. The two verses are different. Yeah, see how it just doesn't really even feel like there's any repeated material. Let's listen to that again. It's kind of cool harmonic movement there, actually. For me, it was kind of hard to figure out exactly where the pulse was, kind of a little bit. Um, it seemed a little meandering, right? The melody, it seemed like a little kind of not unintentional. I don't want to say that, but it was like, it's kind of like it was hard for me to grab onto. Whereas like the parallel periods, it's like I've heard this before, then I hear it again. It's a little more regimented, I feel, in that way. But it still was cool though. I like the harmonic movement, especially this third measure had like that nice descending thing going, the chromatic. But yeah, an example of contrasting. So now they also have ones called double periods. If you guys can guess what that would be, it would just, instead of two phrases, it's four. The first three of them all end in some sort of in conclusion, right? Even if it's an authentic cadence, they don't end perfect authentic. Like the root doesn't end up on top. So I want to play this here. And it says very often the first and third phrase, as well as the second and fourth phrase, are similar. First and third, second and fourth, which makes sense, right? Like poetry, A, B kind of things. That's more common than A, B, B in this kind of like phraseology, if that makes sense. Right? First and third are very similar. Second and fourth are a little more different. You can see the bass. The bass is moving identically. I mean, well, honestly, even the second and fourth phrases look pretty similar, right? Like if you're looking here, it's all right. Boom. And then if you look down here, it's the same kind of thing. The only difference is the last measure, right? Was the first one. Or sorry. So it could end on the 5, right? So it feels unfinished. And then at the end, whatever it is. Oh, that was kind of cool though. But sorry. That would be the very last phrase. Yeah. So I mean, these are pretty simple examples, but I think showing examples that are simple at least really help me to like kind of see it better. So then there's these ones called expanded periods and modulating. I mean, you guys can kind of, when it gets into these kinds of phrases and stuff, when it's the multiple choice kind of situation, it's a little more obvious, right? Expanded would mean it's like with 3 or more phrases and it's like kind of, it's just expanded. The double period actually could be considered an expanded, but it's a little more common than all the other ones. Cause like, look here, all of these ones are, oh yeah, so the inconclusive cadence, and then perfect authentic. And all after here, it just kind of gets a little less symmetrical. Modulating period, if you guys can guess what that would be, changing keys, right? Where the second phrase goes into another key. Asymmetric periods, not symmetrical. So if there's like the first phrase has 4 measures, the second phrase has 5 or 6, that would be an asymmetric period. If you were to put it on like a scale, if one side were to weigh more than the other, you know what I mean? Like the second half has like an extended cadence or something like that, that would be an example of an asymmetric period. And if they don't meet any of that criteria, then it's called a phrase group. But that's uncommon. Then I got one more thing. And I think I've talked about this before. So it's just a little more reminder. But do you guys know what a motif? I don't know why they call it motive. It's annoying to me. But if you see this, it means it's like a motif, which in English, right? You know what that, like a recurring theme, recurring symbolism throughout the book or whatever. I mean, and they're showing us right here. This is an example of like a repeated motifs, even rhythmically. So right, so that would be a repeated thing. But rhythmically our rhythmic motifs are very common. Right? Boom, boom, dun, dun. If you kept it going, like for example, this would be an example of if you kept on doing the motif. You know what I mean? Like that would be an example of like, okay, there's an obvious motif. And you can hear that in pop songs, in like film scores, like whatever. Star Wars is like the best at this because John Williams writes like these themes, and whenever you hear it, dun dun bum 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 bum, and you're like, oh, Darth Vader or the Emperor or whatever, you know what I mean? That's like the motif of the dark side. So if you're thinking in those terms, it's like a repeated phrase or series of notes, whether rhythmically or melodically, that you can see throughout the piece. Cool. Is that making sense? Yeah. So that's pretty much all the information I was wanting to give you. And like I said right here, this is a diagram, and I put all of these onto this assignment that I made for you guys. Forms and phrases. So I have this tutorial here, that website that I was just on. And then I have this phrases diagram, which looks like this. And then this is the actual exercise itself. It's just from our sight singing book. But what I want you to do, instead of reading them, singing them, I want you to identify whether the line is either a parallel period, similar period, or contrasting. label the phrases as antecedent, consequent, or neither, and then identify if you see any motifs. So for example, I'll do this first one. Number 23, let's take a look here. So first off, we don't really need to look at the key for this one quite yet. I'm looking more at just the shape of how things are going. So if I'm trying to figure out whether this is a contrasting or a parallel period, that kind of implies that there's two halves to it, right? So right off the bat, I'm just going to look at it in terms of two halves. Divide up the thing. And now let's look. Does this look like it's a similar thing on the second half as the first half? I would say this is pretty similar to this right here, right? It has that motif. It changes a little bit here, and then it definitely changes at the back half here. But since these are smaller, like little increments, I would consider this first phrase antecedent. Consider this consequent. And then this would be, for me, I would call this a parallel period. Then motifs. I mean, you can kind of see that both of them have the same, they like have identical rhythms, these phrases. Da 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 da. So that would be an example of a rhythmic motif. And then you could also see this little bum bum ba 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 dum da da, right? That would be an example. So you could also circle this. Oops, sorry. Circle these little things and say like that would be considered a motif. And then you could also say on the side, okay. And so that would be an example of how you could do one of these. My specific like format of it with circling and like how I did it, if you have like a different kind of like way that you want to tell me that's fine. Like if you, like some people just want to write it out. So it's like the first two phrases are antecedent, the second two are consequent. It is a parallel period with rhythmic motifs and melodic motifs at the very beginning, right? So you could do that, but I personally like just drawing it out like this. It helps me understand it, like a more of a diagram situation. But yeah. So does that make sense how I got there and how I kind of figured this out? You look at them, kind of see, okay, are these similar? Are these different? Look, basically the thing is to look for similarities first. And if you're not finding anything, it's going to be a contrasting period. Which if it's contrasting, there probably won't be motifs, really. And if there's a contrasting period, the antecedent and the consequent, it doesn't really work that way. It doesn't feel like a question and answer. It just feels like a piece. You know what I mean? So if it is a contrasting period and you find that, then that's kind of it for that question. Okay. Is all this making sense to us? Cool. All right. Well, I will let you guys go and you guys can do that assignment. And I will see you guys tomorrow at 12:45. I'll stick around if you guys have any questions, but you guys are free to go. Thanks. Bye, guys.